Hey, welcome to the second part of the resources for the GSSE video. If you haven't seen the first part already, I'll put a link to that somewhere, somewhere, and you can have a look at that first, and then we'll move on to the second part. Enjoy. So the two courses that I involved myself in was the Graduate Diploma of Surgical Anatomy and also the St. Vincent's GSSE prep course. The Diploma of Anatomy, so it's called the Graduate Diploma of Surgical Anatomy at University of Melbourne, and I'm sure there are equivalents around Australia at the different universities, but effectively it was a 6-month intensive anatomy course, which involved lectures, cadaveric dissections, and also prosections as well. It was a fantastic course for anatomy and especially good for visual learners, but I think the benefit comes not only in preparing you for the GSSE, but also just preparing you for being a better surgical resident who has a good understanding of anatomy, so that when it does come to you consenting patients, being in theatre, understanding the pathologies that you're treating, you are much better versed at doing that. One thing to note is that it's not a walk in the park. The Diploma of Anatomy at Melbourne Uni requires a significant time commitment with the classes alone. So classes will run 3 times a week, 2 weekdays and 1 on the weekend, and requires around about 9 contact hours. Now, you don't need to go to all of those 9 contact hours. But obviously, if you have work, you're not going to be able to go. If you've got other commitments, you're not going to be able to go. But the less you go, the more detriment it is to yourself. You're already paying for the course, so it's in your best interest to try and go. Usually you end up splitting your time kind of half-half between prosections and dissections, and on some weeks you'll have formative assessments such as flag races or oral presentations, and these all are leading up to your final assessments, which are going to be a final summative flag race and a final summative 2 oral presentations right at the end. So just keep in mind that if you do choose to do this course, it's in your best interest to go during the time that you're allocated, that they have the labs open, and you have the instructors there who are willing to help you and guide you. But also, if you are unable to make it, you actually do get access to the labs after hours, COVID pending, so that you can go there and learn by yourself, or actually not by yourself, with someone else. You have to have someone else with you if you go into the labs, but just keep that in mind. Now, when I say it's got a significant time commitment, it's because the course actually moves at quite a fast pace. Initially, it's a little bit slower, just to ease you into it, but then it quickly ramps up. Now, I actually ended up taking the course twice. The first time I took it was in 2020, and I just found the pace too much for me. I was not prepared to put in the time, or did not know that how much time I had to put in to the course, and so I didn't, and I fell behind really quickly, and that really stressed me out. And I actually ended up dropping out of the course, partly due to COVID, partly due to I just felt like I wasn't really doing it right. So I've taken it a second time in 2021, really put in the time, and I got a lot out of it. I thought that it helped me prepare for my GSSE. The anatomy I was definitely up to scratch with when it came to exam time, but also since doing the course, I felt a lot more comfortable and confident at work. When I'm consenting patients, when I'm in theatre, when consultants ask me questions, when I'm asked to do things or hold structures, etc., I feel a lot more confident, and I think it's partly because of the course that I've done. The timing of the course means that it's fantastic for the July GSSE, or at least the one at University of Melbourne is. You'll have kind of reached the peak of your anatomy knowledge just prior to starting your revision for the GSSE, because the exams for the Diploma of Anatomy are kind of end of May, start of July time. So you would have spent from end of January, when the course starts, up until about June studying for the Diploma of Anatomy, and that amount of study that you do is probably almost enough for the GSSE. So you're kind of doing concurrent study for both the Diploma of Anatomy and also the anatomy portion of the GSSE. So you will definitely come out ready to tackle that exam. It is obviously great for visual learners, has a significant time commitment, but it's also got a cost commitment as well. It's about a $20,000 course. I think it's $19,000 and something. However, it can be deferred onto HECS. So keep that in mind when you are thinking about doing this course. If you do have if you have a family member who works at Melbourne Uni, then you will get a discount on the course. So also keep that in mind. That may be a little bit more of an incentive for people to do it. Next, we've got the St. Vincent's GSSE prep course. So this is a course run by the Surgical Society at the St. Vincent's Hospital, which covers your pathology and physiology as well as micro and statistics and pharmacology, but not anatomy. So this particular prep course was run completely via Zoom in my year due to COVID, and was actually quite helpful in revising for those particular topics. I didn't necessarily use it so much to learn those topics, because I found the summary notes and the text a lot better. Well, summary notes and YouTube a lot better for that perspective, but it was really good for consolidating my knowledge right at the very end. Obviously, it's run by different people giving different lectures, so you are going to gel with some lecturers and you're not going to gel with some others, which means that the usefulness of each particular lecture will vary on your learning style. I found that some of the lecturers used or based their teaching around GSSE questions specifically, and I found that really, really helpful because they were explaining concepts that were directly in the questions that I was doing at the time. And some others didn't do that same, didn't use that same tactics, and I found that a little bit less helpful for myself. But keep in mind that the questions that are in the GSSE bank are not necessarily the ones that are going to be repeated. So you do need to have a really good understanding of the topics overall, rather than just trying to bank everything on the questions that you've seen. It's not a very expensive course, so that's good. I guess the hurdle for you entering is not going to be as high as, say, the Diploma of Anatomy. And I think it is something that is valuable for you guys to do, given that it only takes one weekend and it provides you with a lot of revision. Let's discuss question banks. So the GSSE question bank, or the bank of questions that have previously been asked on the GSSE, is probably the first resource that everyone will talk about when it comes to GSSE study. There are thousands of questions out there, and the most popular form that people end up using is an Excel file, which has them broken down into their various topics and also allows you to input your answers and will tell you whether you're right or wrong. So it's got solutions, but they're not worked solutions. Some of the questions do make an attempt at creating worked solutions, but there's no real pictures. They're not particularly that helpful. Well, in my opinion, they're not particularly that helpful, especially when you compare it to the summary notes, which has the question bank questions with worked solutions for all of them. Contrary to popular belief, you'll find that actually not very many of the questions are repeated in the actual exam, but the GSSE bank still remains as probably one of the best study tools that you can have, because it gives you a really good understanding of the depth of question that is going to be asked in the actual exam. So it'll really help you to guide your learning. So I personally started using the question banks from day one of my study for GSSE, because the topics that you are given, anatomy, physiology, pathology, they are so broad that if you were to try and learn everything there is to know about them, you are going to struggle. I use the GSSE bank questions as a guide to figure out A, the kinds of topics that are going to be talked about, but mostly B, the depth to which I need to know something. Obviously, the depth, there are very many different depths of knowledge when it comes to, say, physiology, but even anatomy as well. So you don't necessarily want to go down a deep, dark hole learning about something specific in physiology when it's just not going to be asked. And you could have had surface level knowledge of that, and that would have been enough. You'll find that the questions are sometimes repetitive, but that only reinforces the type of knowledge you need to have, or the level of knowledge that you need to have. And you'll find that the more questions that you do, you'll be able to figure out other answers and make educated guesses rather than just random guesses. So I would definitely recommend doing the GSSE question bank. I probably ended up doing it around about maybe 4 times-ish. First time it takes forever to get through the bank, because it is such a large bank, thousands of questions, lots of different topics, lots of topics that you've not really been exposed to before, so it requires a lot of reading. But each successive time that you do it, you get a little bit quicker at doing it, and by the end you're kind of just like reeling off answers off the top of your head. Again, that's not necessarily particularly indicative of how well you'll do in the exam, because the exam does not repeat too many questions, but each time you go through it, you'd be getting a different set of questions wrong. So based on the questions that you got wrong in that particular time that you've gone through it, you would tailor your revision or your learning to that set of questions. What you'll also find is that given that there are so many thousands of questions, even if you do it, 5-6 times, you're not necessarily memorizing the fact that question 36 was true, false, true, false. What you are memorizing instead is little factoids here and there about certain anatomical structures or certain physiological phenomena, etc., and whether those would be true or false. So I think it's actually very helpful for you to go through the GSSE question bank multiple times. The other question bank that I ended up using was the ACC exam question bank, which is a New Zealand based question bank for the GSSE covering anatomy, physiology and pathology. One of the reasons I used this was I needed to supplement the types of questions that I was doing from the GSSE question bank because I knew those questions weren't necessarily going to be repeated, and so doing another question bank I found to be helpful. The primary benefit of the ACC exam is the sheer number of questions. So they've got over 6,000 questions split across anatomy, physiology and pathology. If you've previously used question banks like past medicine and past tests, you'll have a bit of a understanding of how they work and your expectations from it. Unfortunately, the ACC exam wasn't really functionally up to the same level as past medicine or past tests, but I believe they're getting better. I haven't used it now for a few months, so I assume they've made some strides in the last couple of months with regards to their functionality, but it was still quite useful to get the sheer number of questions in. I ended up probably doing around about 4.7 thousand of their questions, and you find that again they become repetitive, but repetitive is not necessarily a bad thing. If you are doing repeated questions but still getting them wrong, then obviously you're not learning. But if you're doing repeated questions and getting them right, then you're kind of facilitating the revision for the exam. So not necessarily a bad thing. It does come at a bit of a cost, so it's 110 New Zealand dollars for 1 month access, which I think is quite steep, especially when compared to the previous question banks that you would have had in medical school, like past tests and past medicine, which were a lot cheaper. So that may, be a bit of a barrier for some people to enter into the ACC exam world. But if you do feel like you need a little bit more revision, definitely one of the resources that you can use is the ACC exam question bank. Moving on to other bits and bobs. One resource that cannot be understated is the Julie Mundy resource. So Julie Mundy is a cardiothoracic surgeon up north who also has ties to RACS, and 3 times a year she will have a cohort of students who run benchmarked practice GSSE exams. So for each set of exam, whether it's the one at the start, the middle, or the end of the year, there will be 2 exams that are held. One is, I believe, around about 3 months out, and one is about 3 weeks out from the exam, and it helps for you to understand where you sit in the cohort of people who are about to take that exam. She provides you with some personalized feedback and tells you what you need to work on, but also her resources are really helpful because she sends you lots of emails with various resources for you to use to learn and revise for the GSSE. The emails that she sends, I think she sends around about 9 in total, are very, very helpful, and the resources that she sends are very, very helpful. And if you can go through those, then you should have a pretty good shot at passing the exam, which is fantastic. When it comes to podcasts, I found a couple of podcasts, mostly around the anatomy sphere, which helped me to study. I guess it's kind of good if you're driving from one place to another and feel like you're wasting time driving, listening to music. Then you can use some podcasts to supplement your learning. But overall, I didn't find too many good podcasts. But if you guys have found good podcasts, please let me know. Pop them down below so I can know about them and I can recommend them as well. And the final note would be MedPlayer. So during my search for finding good resources, I came across one called MedPlayer, which was a UK-based, kind of channel, almost like a TV channel, which has different anatomy style videos on it. Would not recommend. That was definitely the worst investment that I made. Couldn't even get out of it at the end. I ended up having to block my card from them taking money from my card because their customer service was horrible. So if I can recommend you one thing, it's don't use MedPlayer. Alright guys, we've gone through a lot of different resources for what you can use for your GSSE. I think to summarize, the top 3 resources that I found to be most helpful for studying for the GSSE were the summary notes that I had. So the summary notes for the GSSE bank questions with worked answers, Complete Anatomy, which was the 3D Anatomy Interactive Atlas, and finally YouTube. Those are definitely, I reckon, the top 3 things that helped me to pass this anatomy course. This GSSE exam. Let me know what else you'd like me to cover. I plan on doing some GSSE anatomy videos, which cover the common topics that come up in the exam. So hopefully we can look out for that one. But if there's other things that you'd like me to cover, like, my study setup, my study plan, all of those kinds of things, please let me know and I can make a video about it. All right, guys. Thank you.